What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another pulse pounding, action packed episode of Wrestling with ADHD and Bruce. I'm your host, Bruce, sitting in my bedroom, and I am about to bring on my special guest for tonight, Tyler Gillespie. What's going on, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Nothing too much.
So let me. I always have to change my. I always have to change my privacy on this, or
Mm,
none of the comments come through.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's really weird. So let me. So what I'll do is I'll man the comments over here. I pretty much have everything locked in and ready to go. So while I'm doing that, go ahead and introduce yourself. You sent me the bio. I added all that stuff so everybody got to see it. So just in your own words, just kind of introduce yourself.
Howdy. My name is Tyler Gillespie, also known as folks know me as Yogi, Mr. Yonko Bailey, or Ugly Steve Scruggs, just kind of depending on where it is. I've been wrestling for about a year and a half. I've been a birthday clown, a high school teacher, just a general overall nuisance to people. I was trained by Antonio Reyes or El Rey, Craig Stone, and he wouldn't call it training me, but I basically help out with Norman Mekligoff, and I'm pretty sure I just butchered his last name, but
I
it's
do
more of a
I do every time I say his name.
but it has basically been me working with his trainee, Caleb, and he just gives me pointers and everything while I get reps. And so he's not officially my trainer, but for all intents and purposes.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, like once you've been in the business for longer and you've done it for a little while, you'll realize that all of those guys that have taken you under their wing and are showing you stuff, like you'll consider them your trainer.
yeah,
You'll pick up something cool that Norman has done or that he does or that he's teaching, and then before too long you've added it to your repertoire and you're doing it, and then somebody who has never even met you before can watch a match and say, oh my gosh, Norman must have helped him or worked with him. So it's really super cool to see, and it's even cooler to recognize that. So, but yeah, all amazing guys. El Rey, I've actually in 14 years I've only wrestled him twice. He operates mostly on the west side of the state. South Central Wrestling over there, and they do good things. Good shows, good people, good atmosphere.
yeah, 'cause that was the place I debuted at.
Oh wow, Reyes, if you're listening, I'm putting you over bigly. So book a werewolf.
Oh,
Always accepting bookings.
yeah, same. I'm not too far off from
Right?
posting a graphic for it. I've just been having to. Craig is having to kind of like iron out some dates because of somebody who's trying to bring in, and to make sure everything is cool with that. But I've actually got booked for all of December right now
Awesome.
at Hot
Awesome.
Seat, so I'm excied for that.
Oh, right on. Right on. My neck of the woods.
Yep.
Uh, Maybe we'll get to work. Right now, me and Draven are tagged up, but man, me and him are always down to do singles and wrestle new people. So
Oh
it'd
yeah,
be
just
really
some
good.
meaty men slapping some meat.
Oh, absolutely. That's the best.
That's how I've been working. Is a lot of just big guy slugger stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm a bigger guy, but I have as the Warwolf, I wouldn't really call it generic style, but I'm the classic brawler. I have
Mm,
you've seen me. I have
yeah.
an intense style, something that looks really, really, heavy hitting, but it's really not. Really, really good stuff. I mean, I've got a technical background, but Being a bigger guy, I tend to get typecast in more of kind of a ground and pound type role. But I mean, it works. So
Yeah,
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
yeah. And some of those things as a bigger guy is like awkward.
Yeah,
I know like some transitions are kind of weird, and it's to where it's like I've had to just grind that out and constantly do it to where it's just straight up muscle memory.
yeah.
Because I know Norman mentioned to me one time. He was like, "Your body is so weirdly shaped, and I don't know how you're doing this as smoothly as you are." And so I'm just like, I've been doing this for I've
Yeah.
done nothing but this for like the first 3 months of when I was getting trained. So it's
Oh yeah, dude. That's well, I mean, like my story is a little bit different. I honestly, and I don't mind. I used to be ashamed of this, uh, but I don't mind saying it now. I guess I've come to terms with it. I trained for 3 days before I was put in the ring, and the guy that trained me, he our first match, he gave me um like stereo instructions, like 1984 stereo instructions, and it was like this thick of a book,
hmm,
and it went from the time we walked out until the time we walked back to the back, and I ended up blowing all of it out of my ass and forgetting every single thing in the world. I knew how to do the moves, but I couldn't piece it together. And luckily, over the years, I've traveled and I've been in the ring with guys that are phenomenally talented and learned quite a bit. So yeah. So how was? I guess we'll go over the questions here in a second. People that are tuning in that have watched before, they kind of know how this goes. But I like to spend this first little 10 minutes just kind of getting to know you better. And we've talked before in locker
yeah.
rooms. But I kind of feel like this is us getting to know each other, but then the fans are watching, or the people that will watch after this is off. I see you out there. Um, can kind of get to know you through this conversation. I like that. Give them the old stare.
Yeah.
So yeah, like when you so when were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed 2021, so relatively recently.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
So you actually, which is super cool to hear, you actually have a lot in common with the Sauce from Los Crudos,
hmm,
episode 4, I believe, 4 or 5, 4. Yeah, that's it. He he was a late diagnosis, and so you know, talking to him in detail because we book a lot of the same shows together. Um, I got a kind of a feel for, his upbringing and him growing up with having not knowing that you were normal and feeling like you were like almost like a broken toy.
hmm.
How did that kind of work?
Well, growing up, especially like whenever it comes from like high school, I was pretty smart, and so it kind of made it to where no one, to where like that wasn't really a thought. Especially because it's like, oh, ADHD, somebody's going to be hyper, they're going to be bouncing off the walls, and that's not the kind of kid that I was.
I love that
Um,
misconception.
uh, which also turned out to be depression. It's very hard to be all bouncing off the walls when
Yeah,
you're
yeah, that's
clinically
true.
depressed. But thank goodness for trazodone and Prozac. Now, I was just smart enough to where I can kind of get by. But things like homework and stuff was always a struggle because I completely forget. And it wasn't like a lazy, oh, I don't want to do it or something like that. It was just like it completely lost my mind, or I completely forgot about it as soon
The
as I
second,
left that
yeah,
classroom. I put it
the
in my backpack.
second that that's what I was fixing to say. Like everybody that I've talked to uh, in the podcast and outside of the podcast, they say the exact same thing. I think that's why I love doing this so much because as different as you and me and everybody else that I've talked to through this podcast are, we're exactly the same.
Yeah.
The second that you get the homework in your brain, you're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to turn it in. This time is going to be different. The second it goes in your backpack, as soon as it leaves your hand, it's like it just completely ceases to exist.
Yeah. As far
So
as I was concerned, it wasn't there.
yeah, exactly. And then like, when it was like, okay, class, time to turn in the homework, you were like, oh man,
Ruh-roh.
what's
Well,
going on?
I was good enough at it, or quick enough, to where usually whenever that would happen, I would tell them that I left it in my car.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would like reach into my backpack, find the piece of paper, which was a feat in itself because my backpack was
Oh
just
yes.
a complete mess. Any
It
piece
was
of
like a
paper that
kitchen.
I
It was
had,
like a kitchen junk drawer.
yeah, like I'd be a senior and I'd have papers from like ninth grade in there.
Yeah.
And so I'd like grab it, put it in my pocket, and then walk to my car and then walk back. And I would just fill it out. And sometimes this would be like complex stuff, like
Oh
calculus.
yeah.
But I was just good at it.
Well,
So
and
where,
that's another thing. Like now, further back. Well, I mean, I probably high school too. Did you ever feel like in school that you were like really super bored?
all the time.
Same here. And, doing the research and obviously, with the diagnosis, you kind of look more into it. Um, it's like once you learn something, you've got it in your head and you really don't care about it anymore. If it comes up, boom, it's there. But if it doesn't come up, it's like, man, I don't. That's like knowing how many, what the name of the zipper is. I don't care. It's just a zipper.
Right.
I know it's there, but
Right, we're doing the same style of problem 4 times. I got it
yes.
the first time, and I would skip class.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Yes. It's right out of boredom because you're not being engaged. I would have teachers. I'd be the only kid in class that got pop quizzes. And I would get several from the same teacher. And like after the first one, like the second one would come around, and I'm like, why are we doing this? You already know what's going to happen.
Obviously, I know what's
Yeah.
going on. Because I would get that. I wouldn't get like a full on quiz.
No, it would
I
just
don't think
be it
my
would just be like pertinent things that she would or he would think that you just didn't get because you were just not paying attention or
yeah, but they
sleeping.
call you out. I
Yeah.
had one
Oh,
teacher
dude.
who, after like the first couple of times, they were like, you know what, I'm just going to let you sleep.
Dude, I love teachers like that. And me and Brad touched on that subject later in the interview. There really should be a almost like a section of teachers that just know how to teach children with ADHD and hyperactive disorders, because you can engage a kid, and once they have it, it's done. Then they can go and do whatever they want.
Yeah, but then the issue is that then you have the parents that are like, well, my kid doesn't have ADHD. There's nothing wrong with them. As a high school teacher, I faced that a lot.
Yeah.
So I'd have kids that were just the perfect definition of ADHD, bouncing off the walls, couldn't sit still, got him a fidget spinner, and you'd finally pay attention. But the parents were like, nah, not my kid. There's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah. Luckily with my parents, like, my grades started slipping, obviously, because I wasn't paying attention, and I was in the second grade. And now my teachers had actually said something in kindergarten about it. So, and my parents were like, well, look, like it's way too early to tell. Let's just give it a year or two. And if it's worse, we'll fix it. Or if it's at the same level, we'll try to figure something out. So like Ritalin for me, like really the first time I got that, the mental focus that was there was just crazy. I wasn't, all the outside stimulus was gone. So yeah, like I asked that question about, being younger and growing up and not knowing that our brain, that your brain was wired, or your chemicals were jiving in a different a different way. Like how was like elementary school?
Well, with I it's one of those things where I was smart enough to where I just kind of got by
I
with
got you.
basically everything.
So
And
as long as you fit in the box of answering the
yeah,
questions and everything, they didn't really
yeah.
mess with
I
you.
mean, there was also like other things they were worried about a little bit more. Because like growing up as a kid, I didn't really socialize very well. And I didn't get a lot of social cues. I was a mean little shit. And I didn't understand that that wasn't like a deal. And so I had a lot of like child psychiatry visits and everything, psychiatrist visits, trying to handle like how I'm having these very inappropriate responses to what's going on, to where I would break down in tears at just the slightest thing. Turns out it's autism, but
Well, I
um,
mean, one thing that I've realized is ADHD and autism, they go hand in hand. They
oh
are
yeah,
they are similar. So I could understand that. I was just thinking while you were saying that you had a lot of childhood psychologists and stuff. Um, when I was diagnosed, like I went to a doctor, and then the doctor referred me to a psychologist,
mhm,
and that's how I found out.
yeah,
It was a psychologist, and then like when I went to college and I was getting my bachelor's in psychology, I realized, or I found out, that that is the only way you can be diagnosed, is by seeing a psychologist, because they
yeah.
are specifically, taught how to diagnose, ADHD and stuff like that. So I could see how autism could have masked
Yeah. Well,
the
if I remember right,
symptoms of
there's like
ADHD.
there's a lot of overlap between the two, to where a lot of times if somebody has ADHD, they might
Yes.
also have autism, or vice versa. And that's one of those things too, to where it's like a lot of people, especially 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they're thinking autism, they're thinking something completely different.
Yes.
To where, someone uh kind of has that stigma, to where now it's kind of like, oh, it's like a spectrum kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and not like
and
Rain Man over
yeah,
here. That's what
yeah.
people.
Well, and okay, so that right there, that was like one of the severe ends of the spectrum, kind of probably directors and writers not really understanding at that point what autism was,
Yeah.
because when I was diagnosed, ADHD research was still sort of
Mm,
in its infancy. I have an uncle on my mom's side who was one of the first patients to receive Ritalin,
mm,
and it was. I'm not saying that it was like. I'm not saying that he was like a guinea pig or anything, but once the clinical trials were done and all the testing was done, he was one of the first recipients of the medication Ritalin.
mm,
He took it for years, and it actually, being an early test run of Ritalin, he actually got some like nervous tics and
mm,
some issues from that. Eventually, they took him off of it, and they were like, "Well, I guess we'll just deal with this problem child," not knowing, fully what was going on. And this was back in like the 50s and 60s. So even then, when I was diagnosed in the early 90s, it was like fringe science almost. Where it's like, oh, he's got ADHD. Well, let's just group him over there with all the Aspergers and the autistics and the other stuff. Um, but yeah, it was, Ritalin for me helped, but I've talked to other people that said that, Ritalin didn't do anything, or it made symptoms worse. And I'm just like, I got a comment here. I live
mm.
a normal life now, all thanks to microdosing. It's making the headlines these days. I used to have a lot of severe mood swings, anxiety, depression, migraines, cluster headaches, ADHD, PTSD, stress, and panic. Yeah, absolutely. And I get this popping up from time to time where people are really starting to see the medicinal benefits of microdosing
Mm.
THC.
Yeah.
Um, they're doing studies all the time that are just light years from what we knew even a year ago. So
Mm.
uh, William, I 100% agree that if you're getting results with that, man, just keep it up and
Yeah. Yeah.
hope for the best.
Yeah. It's not exactly my kind of scene, but
No, well, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah, it
Well,
works.
but I mean, like, even if it's not a scene, like, if you're using it for strictly medicinal, hey,
Oh yeah,
that's
no,
that's
that's
super
what.
cool. But again, and I'm not talking bad about anybody that
No, no, I was
that
just trying
part.
to say that's like not what I. That's not.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not me.
Well,
That's not me. I didn't
no,
mean to.
no,
I
no, no.
wasn't trying to knock it.
Oh no, I'm the same way. Like, growing up, I did experiment with it, but
Mm.
I it's not something that I'm an adult now, so I do
Yeah,
different things. Whoa, just lost my train of thought for a split second.
yeah,
I was actually reading the rest of it until he was introduced to psilocybin mushrooms.
mm,
Started microdosing. Oh, okay. Started microdosing on those.
yeah,
Greatly reduces irritability and anxiety. With time, it slowly alleviates physical discomforts connecting to PMDD. That's super cool, man. Again, yeah, good stuff. But yeah, like I said, they're always advancing the research in into ADHD and just trying to help people out and I hope that doing this podcast and talking to you and talking to everybody that um, there's a lot more people in the world that have ADHD and have other symptoms and situations. And I hope this kind of breaks down the stigma of that because like growing up, it was like, oh, that kid's got ADHD. Yeah, he's messed up. There's no teaching him anything. So, in episode 1, I actually, I didn't learn my multiplication tables fully until the 9th grade. And I started learning them in the 3rd grade. Um, I just right,
yeah.
but
No,
it,
I feel you on that. Um, which sucks because it's such a pain in the ass to try to get Adderall now.
yeah, well, and unfortunately,
Yeah,
the people that abused it kind of made it a little harder to get, and
yeah,
it's you go to a doctor and say I need Adderall, then they're like,
yeah. Do you?
do you, do you now? How much you need?
Yeah. No, because I, for the longest time, until basically just recently, um, I was medicated, using Adderall, and then whenever I moved to Jonesboro, because before, whenever I got diagnosed with everything, I was living in Little Rock, but my general physician was in Dumas. He's the guy that I always use and everything. And my therapist or psychiatrist was also in Dumas. So that's where I got my diagnosis. And it wasn't bad because Dumas, Little Rock is like an hour.
Yeah,
Now that I'm in Jonesboro, it's about 3.5 hours. So I can't just go.
yeah, yeah,
And so for the longest, I was medicated and then I was just rationing it to where it's like, well, I'm wrestling. I have this fairly dangerous hobby that requires me to
focus.
always focus. Yeah. Cause I'm like, if I'm spaced out at the wrong spot, I'm afraid somebody can get hurt or I get hurt or that the match looks like shit.
Yeah,
Um,
there's definitely a certain level of mental focus that has to be maintained almost at all times.
yeah. And then it's like, wow, I'm almost out. And so I'm like, whoa, I wonder what it's like wrestling unmedicated. And I've been doing that for about a month so far because I only have like one thing of Adderall left, and I'm saving that for my match with Garion in
Mm.
the Wiener Festival.
Oh
Rice
wow, yeah,
Festival. Yeah.
that's gonna be wild. Oh yeah, hey, if you're paying attention and you like watching wrestling, October 14th in Weiner, Arkansas, the something annual. It's well over 100 years.
Yeah.
Rice Festival. A lot of good, wrestling, a lot of good talent. The actual festival a couple of years ago, I tagged with my tag partner. We were in Beer 30, and we did the Rice Festival, and hanging out and doing the fest after the wrestling was super cool. Buddy just commented, had to see a psychologist. He said, "You ever been to prison? Because I can tell you're a handful. I was 28 when I was re-diagnosed." Uh, Draven Wiener.
Wiener.
But yeah,
Oh yeah, and that reminds me that it's been a pain trying to get Adderall whenever I'm up here because I had to switch doctors, and they don't know, and they're like, "Well, I can't just give you Adderall. You have to get the stuff from there sent to here," and that's a terrible thing to tell somebody with ADHD because I forgot.
yeah.
I forgot. I still haven't sent it.
Well, luckily, being married definitely helps. I stopped taking Ritalin in the 9th grade. I was told that if I wanted to ever have a possibility of joining the military, I could not be on medication in the crucial 4 years of high school. So I kind of talked with my mom and dad, and we kind of was like, look, I'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work, I'll go back on it. So I had to learn real quick to learn to focus. I call it ADHD for normal, or normal for ADHD. It's like American Sign Language, but it's things that I've learned to do that things that I've learned to do that don't make people aware that I have that in my head I'm bouncing off the walls,
Yeah,
or
it's masking.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I am I am a just a level 100 wizard at masking.
Yeah.
I,
Oh no, I feel you. 'Cause growing up, our family business was in the car business, and a lot of that is dealing with people or dealing with other dealers. And so masking was a big kind of thing I had to learn because it's like, oh, how do I do small talk? How do I just keep bullshitting? Or
yeah.
I learned how to bullshit.
I did a lot. I grew up and I did a lot of people watching. You know what I'm saying? To try to pick up on those social cues and how to have a normal conversation without, whoa,
Yeah, this is Pepper.
heck
She's my neighbor.
yeah.
I have like 3 cats.
Oh, that's super cool.
And she's the only one that likes me more than or likes me more than my wife. So
Oh wow. So
the other
yeah,
two like,
anytime lovins are happens, you got to take them.
yeah.
I had a cat growing up, and I had him for 18 years, and it was when he passed. I didn't have an animal for a while, and then my family, to try to make me feel better, we found a dog, and so you may hear dogs in the background at some point. I haven't heard them bark yet, but if you go back and listen to any podcast that I'm on in the past couple of months, you've probably heard my dogs. I've got a
Yeah, I
pack
see
of
him
them.
or I heard him on one of the STUs.
Yeah. And when that happens, I just kind of get quiet and look over to the door. I'm like, "Who you guys?"
I doubt the other 2 will pop up. If they do, I'll hold them up because they are significantly fatter than her. So
That's awesome. I love animals, all kinds of animals.
Same, yeah.
So let's get into the questions. They're only 5, but like I said, we can I'll ask them, and then we can kind of expound on them a little bit. Dang it.
Yeah, I feel like I got the same thing going on.
So I may have already asked this, and the answer, not necessarily academically. So how did ADHD affect you growing up? obviously you didn't realize that you had it. So like, were
Yeah.
there were there instances of getting into trouble? Were there instances of, besides the homework thing, like were there instances of, just what kind of dealios did you deal with?
A lot of it was just dealing with forgetfulness, or completely just forgetting people existing was one. That was, I feel like, one of the roughest parts whenever it was like early college, was that I didn't check in with like my parents that often, or like my grandparents, because I completely forgot they existed because they were already out of mind or out of sight, so they were out of mind. um, that's one of the roughest parts of ADHD that I kind of deal with, is just the void. I kind of feel like it is, to where um, if I'm not thinking about it, if it's not directly there, it's like it doesn't exist. And that kind of stuff is made dealing with like memories really difficult. Like it's one of those things to where it's like, oh, I spent, now baby, you're gonna have to move.
That's cool.
Sorry.
Special guest Pepper.
So where it was like dealing with memories, or the lack thereof, it's like, oh, I spent a significant amount of time with my great grandmother, um, and like I was over at her house more than my own, and since she's passed around 10 years ago, a lot of those memories are completely gone. And so that's kind of like, also I was a theater major, and I was trying to act. And one of the most important things with acting is being able to memorize. I was terrible at it, because I would completely forget. And whenever I'm talking to my professors or my advisors, they're like, well, you're not forgetful, you're just being lazy. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I can't remember this. And they're like, well, why don't you put things in a planner? And I was like, I've tried that. I lose the planner. The planner doesn't exist. I forget to put things in the planner. As soon as it's out of my view, it's like it's not there.
Yes. Um, so I had similar situations like that. I'm 40 years old, and thank you for saying that, by the way, because I just remembered that I haven't talked to my mom and dad in several weeks.
Yeah, I realized I hadn't. I did the same thing. I realized I hadn't, and so I made it like a point for the last few days to make sure
Yeah,
that.
and I hate that so much. I love both my parents to death, and I know you do too.
Mm,
Um, it's difficult when they say, why don't you call? Because then in my head, I feel like shit.
yeah.
You're right. I don't call enough. I can't find the words to tell them that I love you so much, but if I don't see you or communicate with you on a regular basis daily,
Mm.
you aren't there.
Yeah, it's like I don't know how to
Um,
explain to somebody, but sometimes I forget my first name. Like
it it
if
happens.
I
It
don't hear it
happens.
within
Yeah,
like
yeah. If in the Marine Corps, it was like that. So for 6 years in the Marine Corps, I was Smith.
yeah.
Whatever rank I was, and Smith.
Oh, fuck.
Um,
I all this time I thought your last name was McGowan.
I'll go on a little caveat on that. So Smith is Scotch Gaelic for McGowan.
Mm, okay.
I'm Scotch German, Scotch Dutch. My lineage. So when I was Sideshow the Clown, that's who I was.
Mm,
Um, when I took the mask off, that was the best way I can describe it is there was a comic several years ago. It was a Batman comic, and when he put the Batman suit on, he said, "Bruce Wayne is the mask.
mm,
Um, this is who I am. This is my real face. Bruce Wayne is the mask." So as Sideshow, that was who I was. And when I got with Dirty Little Dave and I took the mask off eventually, um, I was Sideshow Bruce. And then when I was no longer Sideshow, I didn't know who I was.
mm.
I was this wrestler that was decently trained at that point. I just didn't have a name. So I almost had like a existential crisis of who I was and in the wrestling world. I knew everybody had a name, but I did not. So my reasoning behind that is McGowan means son of a smith. A Gowan in Gaelic is an iron worker, a smith. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a blacksmith.
Yeah.
And in Scotch Gaelic, Mac, which means son, is the Irish equivalent of MC.
Yeah.
Or MAC is the Scottish equivalent of Mac or Mick. So that's where the name came from. So basically, I am wrestling under my real name. I just dropped the Wayne, so it's just Bruce McGowan. Also, my real middle name is Wayne. So, so yeah, that was kind of my thing, and now everybody knows me as Bruce Wayne or Bruce McGowan because sometimes fans be crazy.
Oh yeah, no, I understand. I've gotten some messages. It's wild. Some mainly people upset because like they'll find me and they're upset like their kid didn't get a balloon animal or something. I'm just like, bro, there's 100 kids.
Several years ago, I actually had some fans show up at my house, and it was really weird. I didn't know how to react to that because up to that point, it had never happened. And they weren't like aggressive or mean. They were actually fans of me from like several years back, and they lived in the same town that I did, but they didn't really know where I lived. And I guess they were just driving by and I happened to be outside and they were like, oh shit, it's Bruce. I had to politely explain to them that, hey guys, that guy that you see at a wrestling show, that's not this guy.
Yeah. Boundaries.
Yeah. It was really weird. So like, it was almost like not really like my first taste of like stardom and like fans finding me, but it kind of was, it was like, oh, wait a second. I like that, but I don't like that at all. I like the recognition, but I don't like the thought of any random person. Because at some shows I'm a bad guy, or I have been a bad guy at some shows. And I learned from old school guys that if you're doing your job, the fans want to find you.
Yeah.
So it was kind of scary, but I went about it the right way, and I just kind of explained to them that, hey, this is not appropriate. I only know you from wrestling shows, so I don't know you outside of wrestling. So this is my safety. This is my safety zone. This is my bubble. This is my escape from that world. The same as wrestling is an escape from this one. So, but yeah, that's and one thing. Dude, I went off on a tangent on the name. So, so in the Marine Corps, it was, Private, PFC, Lance Corporal, Corporal, Sergeant Smith. It took me a while to realize that I had a first name that wasn't my rank after I got out, got into the civilian world, and people started calling me Bruce, and I would almost completely ignore them. And then in a split second be like, oh, you're talking to me. Hey, sorry, I wasn't ignoring you. I just forgot I had a first name.
Yeah. That's how it was like with teaching, because nobody calls me Tyler. It's as a teacher, it's always Mr. Gillespie.
Yeah. So that first name just kind of gets swept under a rug.
I'm not going to talk to myself, and if I do, I'm not going to call myself by my name.
Right.
My wife only calls me by my name if I've done something wrong. So
yeah. I actually had a weird thought today. Like, of course, me and my wife, Saturday, we celebrated our 22 years of being married. And I think I could probably, if I had 100 fingers, I could probably count how many times in 22 years that I've actually called her by her name. As being married, it's always babe or honey or sup, good looking, just it's always pet names.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, right now
so
my wife's favorite one for me is Stink. So
oh, lovely.
yeah, no, it's romantic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 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 it's romantic. Isn't that right, baby girl? She's like, "Oh, baby." She's in the other room.
Oh, hey, look, honestly, um, being married with ADHD is sometimes the best and the worst thing ever.
Oh yeah.
More best times, more best than worst because like if you don't want to go anywhere, you just act up, and then your wife never wants to take you anywhere.
Oh God, no, my wife. It's very something similar with that. My wife hates going with me to Target, um, or she hates bringing me to Target because I have the unfortunate thing of ripping the gnarliest, most unimaginably smelly farts.
Oh, right on. So
And
like
so,
so like society forgetting farts.
yeah,
I
no,
love those. Like, there's nobody here on this earth but me. Rip.
yeah, follow you down 3 aisles,
Wow, awesome.
on a fart.
That could be considered a
Uh,
superpower almost.
oh yeah, no, I'm glad that I'm not in one of those things because that's what it would be, and I'd, um,
That's
that's a
great.
legacy to leave. That's
That's great. That's so cool. I know it sounds like I'm not being serious, but I actually am. That's super cool. I find that very, very hilarious. Me, I'm just loud. Uh,
yeah,
I don't mean to be, but I feel like well, I can't remember the name of that movie where the dude he one of the lines was I can't control the volume of my voice, and the throughout the that line he's varying the level of his voice, and so I can't
kind of familiar.
yeah, it's like I can't control the volume of my voice. I can't remember exactly what movie it was, but I'm a walking pop culture reference.
Mm,
So I could say the line. I couldn't for the life of me. Like if there was a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you what
right.
movie it was or who exactly said it. But yeah, that's a thing, man. Like I was saying before, like with remembering, like I have a healthy dose of PTSD from combat and
Mm,
diagnosed in 2009. And if it wasn't for my wife, I don't know if I would ever take my medication because like I don't I don't recognize that I have a problem.
mm,
So I use other people to kind of gauge the level of problem I'm having that day. So, like, if the wife asks me if I've taken my medicine,
mm.
I hear, "Hey, dumbass, take your medicine." But really, she's just trying to remind me to take them instead of saying, "Hey, maybe you should go take your medicine because
Yeah,
you are getting there." You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So that helps. With wrestling, like you were talking about with the planner in school, I used to, and I sort of have been fighting this problem for the past couple of years. Of somebody will come to me and say, "Hey, I want to book you on this show. It's on this date." Yeah, man, I'm down. And then I'll go back later, and I'm like, "Yeah, it turns out that I was already doing something on that date, so I can't."
yeah. Turns out that's my anniversary. Like,
Yeah, I literally have to do that. So what I do is I don't even if my anniversary falls on a weekend, I just tell everybody that I'm wrestling for, hey
yeah,
guys, the weekend of the 23rd of September, I will not be wrestling. So don't call me
mm,
because I'll show up
yeah.
and then I'll die.
Oh God, a similar vein. So one of the things I used to do in college and everything was that I commentated uh, for a fighting game, Smash Brothers. I was a commentator for it, and I traveled across the southern U.S. doing this. Um, and whenever it was the first 3 months, no, it was about the first. It was the first year Kate and I were dating, and I was getting I had a paid gig, and they were like, "Hey, can you come on this date and everything? We're going to pay you $150 to drive to Memphis and commentate this deal for us." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then I told Kate, I was like, "Hey, baby girl, I'm getting a paid deal. It's on this date." And she was like, "Well, that's my birthday."
Oh,
And so I was like, "Well, no, it's fine. I can do it." She's like, "No, do what you want." And so I did what I wanted, and she spent her birthday with me commentating Smash Brothers.
oh wow.
Um,
Hey, so not to cut you off,
yeah.
but is this something that I could like purchase and hear your voice, or is it like what is that? I'm sorry, Smash Brothers, Smash Bros.
Smash. It's a fighting game. And so I was doing commentary like over it while people were competing.
Oh, I thought you meant like they used your voice, and I was like, bro, that is super super cool.
No. I was no. They would have tournaments and everything, and they would
Oh,
stream it.
sweet,
And so I was
sweet.
commentating over it.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
So she was my wife would describe that as being the most miserable she's ever been in her entire life.
Oh yeah, no, that date
Will go
that
down in
birthday was
infamy.
bad. Oh yeah, no. She oh goodness, I might have reminded her about it now.
Uh-oh.
I don't. She hasn't turned around.
Well,
I don't think she's wearing headphones, so
I do apologize if I tore a Band-Aid off too quick.
oh no, it's fine.
Those are the wounds that never end, that never heal.
Well, it could have been worse. It was worse too, because I asked her what she wanted for her birthday, and she's like, "Oh, you don't have to get me anything." And
dude,
she's still with me though. That's how
hey, that's so good. That's so great. I had to let the wife know early, like in our dating, that I wasn't a psychic. I don't pick up on social cues. I'm not a mentalist. I can't read minds. If you want me to do something or you don't want me to do something, you have to be the most serious and the most spell it out as you've ever been in your entire life. Because if you say, "Hey babe, go hang out with your friends and enjoy your night," guess what Bruce is gonna do?
Yeah. I didn't realize how poorly I picked up on social cues until I was with my wife, and she was very clearly explaining, "It's like, hey, you're a fucking idiot."
Right. I've had those same conversations with my wife, and yeah,
Because whenever I've said, I was like, "Hey, I don't want anything for my birthday." I was like, "Oh, I don't want anything."
Sweet,
And
off
then,
the hook, right?
yeah. No, it wasn't like that's how it worked.
Yeah.
And then we had a very we had a heart to heart, a very very clear understanding and dialogue, this discussion.
Yes. Yeah, you probably hear them. There they are.
Hey.
Sons of bitches. But no, yeah, I completely get it. I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you it gets better from somebody who's been married for 22 years, but it's downhill from here, bro.
I don't know. I don't know if I describe a day with my wife as downhill. It's always going
okay.
uphill. I love her so much.
So don't get me wrong. I absolutely love being married, and I love my wife to death. Hey, it's the Supreme Kenny Omega. Supreme Kenny Omega. But yeah, I absolutely love my wife and I love being married, but I realize every day how inept I am at every single thing.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah,
I mean, I at least I know my weaknesses and I'm working on them. So that being said, I love you, Kim. If you tune in at some point, or if you are one of the 3 people watching now, I love you very much. Don't suffocate me in my sleep. So yeah. question number 2. How has having ADHD affected your wrestling career up to this point?
It's made me really meticulous on a lot of things to where I can't think about it, because if I think about it, I'm going to forget. And so I've had to dedicate a lot of stuff into muscle memory, to where it's like I cannot afford to hesitate whatsoever. My body has to know what it's doing before I can even think about it. It's and I feel like the fact that I've been medicated throughout most of it has really helped, because I know like the first 3 months I remember driving up to Antonio's, taking an Adderall and drinking a Bang while I go up there, just so I can make sure that I concentrate. That was my pre-wrestling routine until my blood pressure got bad, and then it's like, oh, if that happens, I lose some of my vision.
Yeah.
That's terrifying the first time that happens.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's like, oh, I would expect it to be a black spot. It's like, no, it's just not there. So, and I guess now, since for the most part I've been wrestling unmedicated, a lot of it is just making sure things are very simple, and that I'm thinking about them beforehand, because I don't think. I just kind of do, and that's kind of
Right.
describes a lot of myself as a person.
Yes, absolutely.
I mentioned that to my wife, and she was astounded, because she's like, "What do you think about it?" And it's nothing. It's a void most of the time, or it's just like an abstract feeling.
Yeah.
And
It's almost like well, it's clinically it's called impulse control. People with ADHD, our brains are wired to get as much dopamine as we possibly can out of every situation. So you could be doing something as innocuous as mowing the yard. I'm mowing my yard. I'm making sure I'm staying in line so I get those nice angles and everything, and I'm getting everything done right. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see something, and I'm like, oh, it would be cool. I'm gonna make a circle in this yard. Instead of going in lines, I'm gonna go in circles now, and we'll do a spiral pattern. And you just do it, and before too long, you completely. Well, look, I'm old, so like I like a nice crisp looking yard. So I think I've completely just ruined my yard, and I have to let it grow completely back out and start from scratch. So impulse control is a big thing, because like for a normal person, something as simple as typing a letter or writing a letter, or doing something that they do at work, that something as simple as breathing or blinking could give them dopamine. If I get bored, I have to find something to do, or I fall into a weird sort of depression. So I talked about this painting that I have, and this painting, it's got I paint. So this painting has like 6 different paintings underneath the one that I left on top, and I ended up ruining the painting, but it was because I just kept getting bored, and I'd have to go back and the sauce. What is up, my brother? So I would end up getting bored, and then I would cover the painting, and I would start again. And finally, I realized that I just got to get this out of my face and out of my yeah, brother. I got to get this out of my sphere of vision, because if I don't, I'm just painting wasn't doing it for me anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I realized that I was going to throw it away, and the wife said, "No, keep it." So I kept it, and every time I look at it, it's like, hey, sometimes you're going to get bored doing the thing that you love to do. You have to find a way to make it entertaining again. And not necessarily, like wrestling in general. I've been wrestling for 14 years. So I have to always find new things to do in wrestling to make it fun for me.
Yeah.
In my head, I've been doing one match, and I don't do it all the time, but I've been doing one match for 14 years.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the same guy, but it's the same type of movements, and it's the same. And so I'm like, I'm gonna do my best to stay away from that match, and then
Yeah.
once a year, I find myself going through the motions, and I'm like, wait a second, I'm trying to get away from that, and then the next week I completely reinvent myself, and
Yeah. Which also it's made me absolutely terrible in the back if somebody is like, "Hey, can you watch my match?" Or "Hey, what did you think about my match?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's good, man." And it's because I completely blanked out halfway through watching.
well, and I get that as well to a certain extent. I have people that ask if I'd watch their match, and I don't. There's so much stimulus in the locker room of a
Yeah.
wrestling show that I have to almost be a dick to my friends and say, guys, leave me alone and let me focus on this match. I have to watch this match. Um, but then, sometimes outside stimulus comes in and it's like, okay, well, it pulled me away. So, hey, man, I got to watch this part of your match up to this point, and then I got pulled away. So I kind of learned a way to listen to the crowd and kind of focus on that while I'm doing other things. And then if somebody comes back and asks, "Hey man, did you get to watch my match?" No, I didn't get to watch your match because I couldn't focus on it, but I
Yeah.
listened to it and I heard the cues, and I could I could differentiate between what you were doing and what your opponent was doing and how the crowd reacted to it. So, and I could kind of give them, pointers that way. And it's almost like a cop out, and I hate doing it, but it's like, hey man,
Yeah.
I didn't get to watch your match, but I heard the crowd, so keep doing good stuff. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to hear, everybody wants to hear what the good stuff that they did, but to get better, you have to hear the bad stuff.
Yeah. And I'm not
I
going to
don't.
give people the bad stuff because I've only been doing this for about a year and a half. Regardless if I notice that it's bad or not, I'm like, it's not my place.
Well, and that was something that I learned in my travels as well. Like, I think one of the reasons why I've made so many friends over the years is because I'm not a I try not to bullshit people.
Yeah.
I give them the brass tacks. Like, hey man, that thing that you did out there with the toes and the lockup or whatever it was, man, that was really cool. But then like a couple of moves later, or a couple of minutes later, you did this thing, and dude, it was garbage. And I don't
Yeah.
mean any disrespect by that, but mosquitoes. But it was, it was just, it was garbage. What you could have done was this, and it would have hit the same, but it would have been a different reaction.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, when I ask somebody to watch my match, I tell them from the jump, like, dude, I know the good things that I can do, and I know that I do bad things. If I do those bad things, please tell me. And it's a mutual respect thing because
Yeah.
what is it? Steel sharpens steel,
Yeah.
or it's one of those things where like you can't. Dang. I have to know the bad stuff that I did, or I can't fix it. So that was my whole thing with that. So yeah, I do similar things. I used to have a bad habit of forgetting all of my spots,
Mhm.
and because I was so focused on what everybody else was doing, I would lose my entire train of thought. Um, Now, if one of my opponents was like, "Hey, after this spot, what do I do?" Then I'd be like, "Oh, this is what you do." And then he's like, "Okay, well, what do you do after?" And then I'm like, "Well, you see, there's the rub, buddy.
Yeah.
I don't know." So, that used to be a big pet peeve of a lot of people that wrestled me. Like, and I had a guy, he was a pretty big name. It was on a show with me, and so yeah, real quick, Terrence Ward, really awesome guy. I've literally known him almost my entire career,
Yeah.
and really awesome guy. um,
Big following on TikTok.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Um, but
And he's
I was
verified on Instagram. I found that out today.
do what?
He's verified on Instagram.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've been trying to
Yeah.
have that. I've been trying to get verified for several years now. I just don't know the process, and then when I try to learn the process, I just get bored with it, and I'm like, I don't need
Yeah.
to get verified. But yeah, I would just go blank. I would forget everything. Um, it just it's an unfortunate side effect.
Mm. Yeah.
So what are some tricks that you've and again, like I told you earlier, every question will lead into the next one, or you've
Mm.
already answered it. What are some of the tricks that you've learned to control it and not so much let it control you?
um well I well, that's kind of the thing, is that a lot of it I don't necessarily have tricks for it, um for dealing with it. I've never been a very proactive kind of person. I've always been more reactive. Um, and I've just learned to be, well, I guess this is a trick. I've just learned to be incredibly flexible, and just kind of go on from there. It's like, oh, I might have forgotten something, but it's, well, I got to deal with that. Um, it's like I didn't prevent it, but I'm going to have to change plans. I'm going to have to do whatever. That's just kind of how it is. I've I've improvised life for a
Yeah,
lot of it. It's very kind of like, because in improv, one of the most important rules, like one of the number one rules, is yes and, which basically means that if somebody says something to you while you're doing improv and they're like, "Hey, there's this turtle right there," you need to say yes and, because if you say no, there's not a turtle, you just kill the scene. And I try not to kill the scene of my life. So it's
right,
like, oh,
right.
um, I forgot this. This is where I'm at. Well, I'm going to have to yes and, um, which kind of goes into wrestling. Though I do have one trick, and it is something that Norman taught me. So whenever we wrestle and everything, and he's teaching, he's has like a set of rules. Like their basic ones. A lot of times, it's like rule number one, keep yourself safe. Rule number two, keep your opponent safe. Rule number four is, if you do not know what to do in wrestling match, kick him in the gut. That's basically it. If I don't know where I'm at, if there's an awkward pause, I I kick somebody in the gut.
Right. And that it I call that I me and David at OCW and Hoxie, we have a training school where we teach wrestling,
Yeah.
and one thing I tell people is always have a set of things. They could be two or three different things,
Mm.
but always have a set of things that if you get lost, if you freeze, you don't want the awkward pause because everybody sees the awkward pause.
Yeah.
They don't know, okay, wrestling is scripted. It's controlled chaos to a
Mm.
certain extent. But when you mess up something and you stop, that's when people are like, "Hey, wait a second, he messed something up. I can tell."
Yeah.
So if you just you know swim over it and, like you said, kick them in the gut, the fans have no idea that
Yeah.
you were lost.
And fans don't know what a shine is.
No, no. Well, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's
No.
there's
Yeah.
there's smart marks that kind of can pick up on little cues because they've either
Mm.
A, been watching wrestling forever, or they have somebody in wrestling that explains stuff to them.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, it's one of those things where the awkward pause is what kills a match.
Yeah.
So I love that Norman taught you that.
Yeah.
It is definitely a key to have, that a lot, I say a lot, but it's probably less than a lot of
Mm.
trainers forget to teach their trainees.
Yeah.
Always have a backup plan, because something's going to happen and you're going to forget a spot, or your opponent's going to forget a spot, and you can't just stop and stare at the camera like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
You have to keep moving.
Which it's funny. I have to have a backup plan for the backup plan because my kicks
Right.
are garbage. There's a reason. There's a reason why I don't do them. They're bad. So it's funny.
You probably heard this before, but everything you think is bad will get better.
Yeah.
Especially in wrestling. I have a poor mental image of myself in general, so I think 90% of the stuff I do sucks.
Yeah.
I
can
I have,
relate.
I have people tell me all the time, like, bro, stop saying you suck because you're bordering offensive because you're good.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't really see it, but thanks for being the one that sees it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm the same way. I have to like rewatch because 9 times out of 10 after I finished with a match, I'm like, oh man, that was awful.
Yeah, well,
I have to like rewatch it a few times. Like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah, well, hindsight's always 20/20, and like at first when you look at something, you're like, oh man, that was the absolute shits, and then you watch it again, somebody else watches it, and then you're like, oh well, in the grand scheme of bad things, that wasn't that ranked well close to the bottom of the barrel of bad things. I could have skimmed one right off the top and really, drove home the shit factor, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that goes into question number 4. What are some positives and negatives that you've seen from wrestling with ADHD?
Well, one of the positives, and I guess it's a negative too, is that anything that I watch of myself is almost brand new to me, because a lot of times I completely forget about, after I have that match, I completely forget about it. It doesn't seem like it's a memory. And so I'm watching it back and I'm like, oh yeah, this is nice. This is entertaining. I become kind of like a spectator of something that I've already done. But it's also funny. You get a funny reaction when somebody's like trying to talk to you about it, and you're like, "Man, I don't remember that." And they're like, "Oh, did you did you get a concussion?" And I was like, "Oh man,
autopilot."
Yeah, you don't understand. It's nothing like that.
It's like I look at it. I've described it as like a supercomputer that just like only uses memory for like really super important stuff. Like remember I don't know if you ever watched SpongeBob, but I watch SpongeBob to this day. Remember the episode where Squidward tells him to forget every single thing except for fine dining
and breathing.
and breathing. Dude, I get that way sometimes. Like I only remember the things that like matter. And in the grand scheme of things, well, in my brain, like, hey, I did the match. It's over with. I can't take anything back. I can feel bad that I messed up this spot. Or when I watch it, I'm like, oh God, where'd that come from? Or I find myself like having an inner dialogue in my match. Several months ago, I took a bump, and the first thing I did was throw my head back. And I laid on the mat, grabbing my head while my head was pounding and just being like, wow, that was a really greenhorn thing of you to do. What were you thinking, bud? And then I was like, man, sometimes stuff happens. You're in the moment. You don't think about the bump. You hit your head, and then you're like, all right, there I am. But yeah,
I did that Saturday.
What's up?
I said you just reminded that I did that Saturday to where I took a bump, and Ali Savage. They were having her do a code red off the middle rope.
Oh yeah, I saw a video of that.
Yeah, and so part of the deal, we're making sure she can do it to
several different people. Yeah,
and then Heinzman was like, "Does Ugly Steve want to take one?" I was like, "Oh hell yeah!" So, have you taken one? No, but it looks easy. I hit my head.
And that I know guys that are not personally, but I've talked to guys that are doing it on the major stages, and those guys make mistakes. So I don't feel as bad. You could wrestle 100 matches, and probably 60 of them you're going to do something that isn't necessarily TV worthy or isn't necessarily match worthy, and you're looking back at it and you're like, well, botched that one.
Yeah, there's a reason why botchamania is a thing.
Oh yes, absolutely. When you look at the body of work from somebody and you are tallying up the botches, as long as the botch count is lower than their work rate or their whatever, being able to complete a match, as long as that's real low, there's a lot more important things to worry about in wrestling than little things like that. So, would you classify that as a negative or a positive?
I'm going to be optimistic and say a positive.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, I find myself from time to time dwelling on
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a positive in itself.
Well, no, I'm saying like a negative of it. I'll botch a spot, and then like I had to adopt a mentality of you're not as good as your last match. You're only as good as your next match, because you could have a killer match, and if you have the mentality that you're only as good as your last match, you could be amazing, but then the next week or the next match just blow it out your ass. And then you have that mentality of, well, I guess I'm shit,
Yeah. Which I guess another positive of that, at least for me, is that I forget about my last match. If I have a bad match, I feel bad about it. I forget that it happened, and so I don't feel bad as much.
That would definitely be a positive.
Because God, I had last match I worked. Saturday before last was an absolute stinker of a match. It was a tag team and everything, and it did not gel right. And I was fucked up about it for like that night, and then like the next time at training, because I saw Craig and like I was reminded of it. But for the most part, I don't dwell on it. It's like, oh yeah, that was a thing that happened, and then it goes back into the void.
Yeah. I'm glad that you call it that, because in I guess in medicine, in the health field, there's this mental disorder. I don't know if it's really a mental disorder, but it's called the call of the void, where everybody at one point you're driving down the road and you think, oh, I wonder what it would be like to just veer into oncoming traffic, or I wonder what it would be like to and these may not be like actual things that you voice, or just kind of passing thoughts like, well, it would really
definitely were before I started taking antidepressants.
Well, and I've talked to people of all kinds of walks of life, and they've when I say perfectly normal, I just mean they don't have depression, or they don't have anything wrong with them.
Yeah, neurotypical, I think, is the clinical word.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the main the baseline of what medically you would consider somebody normal.
Yeah.
So that have had these thoughts, and it's not something that anybody would ever act on, but there are some cases where you got to always watch somebody, or they've got to be on medication, because all that call of the void draws them in. But I'm glad that you called that the memory hole, kind of the void, because I've almost, in describing my own ADHD, I've almost taken that phrase, the call of the void, and I've almost adapted it, or I have adapted it to my wrestles with ADHD, or my wrestling with ADHD. The call of the void for me is not really wanting stuff to be memory hold, but when stuff is, it's like, okay, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And in some cases that can be a positive, or it can be a negative. So, but yeah, I was going to say that earlier when you mentioned, stuff going into the void and then being gone.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So, with me, I've had a little bit longer to recognize the situation that I'm in, and really learn how to kind of adapt life with ADHD, so that I'm not like, trying to talk to somebody normal and then all of a sudden I'm like, woo, or just making a noise to get that dopamine of hearing a noise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Uh, I have you were talking about, with kids that, meet every criteria for having ADHD and their parents not wanting to recognize, because there can't be anything wrong with my perfect child.
Mm-hmm.
I I have a little stone that I keep in my pocket, and if I'm in a conversation with somebody and the conversation isn't giving me the dopamine that I need, man, I got my hand in my pocket and I'm rubbing the shit out of that stone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the feel of the smoothness of the one side and the roughness of the other gives my brain the dopamine that I need to carry on a normal human conversation that isn't a bunch of clicks and whistles or
Right.
uh but yeah, so I've had extended period of time to adapt to ADHD for normal, so to speak.
Yeah.
So when I, the whole tips and the whole tricks, maybe, then there's nothing wrong with somebody not having, learned those, or, but if you're learning them now, you're
Yeah.
still getting that and being able to, like you said, you're saving your medication and you've just started wrestling, without it.
Yeah.
You're kind of, you know, it's like going from not a wrestler to a wrestler.
Yeah.
You're taking a leap of faith, and you're paving a new path. So for you, you know, what what being on medication is like, and
Mm.
you're learning what it's like to not be on it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Which
that's
in most cases just means that I brawl a whole lot more compared to whenever I'm
well,
unmedicated.
I've described wrestling as almost like a paint by numbers.
Mm.
As long as the colors sort of match what people have in their mind's eye, uh, close to it, you're telling the story that you're trying to tell. So that um, there's a lot of gray areas in there. Pun definitely intended. You can paint, you can paint with a gray,
Yeah.
and as long as it meets the criteria in the fans' eyes, then it's a wrestling match. So like the brawling, you could fill up a whole match with that.
Oh yeah.
Me and my tag partner probably 4.5 years ago, we wrestled 8 minutes of a 10-minute match, working a headlock.
Mm.
It was the greatest thing ever, because we were heels, so
Yeah.
the fans were pissed, just
Oh, I
absolutely
bet.
pissed. And man, we gave the face one move, and it was a big boot. That was the shove off. It was the duck a line, take a big boot, and dude, the building exploded. It was
Yeah.
like, once you give that face that one move, man, that's all he needs, because you've kind of given the example of shit wrestling up to that point.
Yeah.
um,
It's like how
but
Orton used to draw a lot of heat.
yeah,
A
yeah, just really simple, simplistic
couple
stuff.
stomps and a rear chin lock for 3 minutes.
Yeah, being friends with Derek King, I've been able to watch several of his old OVW stuff when he was working training over there,
Mm.
and watching some of Orton's older matches from back then. It really it really taught me, like, the old school, like, really heel, less is more.
Mm.
Uh, a wrestling fan, they want to see action and they want to see this and they want to see that. But when you take that away from them, that's when you, on a psychological level, that's when you're slapping that person in the face. So in that light, you're really doing a lot more than what you're physically doing. So yeah, positives and negatives. That's a good thing. So now the fifth and final question. And this is something that I've kind of thought about over the years. What is something? What's something that you would say to kid you, adult you now, knowing that you have ADHD, and if there was ever a point when you were a kid that you felt like you were kind of a square peg trying to get put into a round hole, like what are something that you would tell kid Tyler?
Mm. Hmm. Wow. Probably just more of you're not lazy, you just have ADHD. Like, you're autistic as shit. That's what you are. Uh, just like, don't worry, kid. It doesn't get better, but at least you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that and start wrestling before you're 27. Do that.
Hey,
Say that.
dude, I've been wrestling for 14 years. I started almost 2 months after I turned 26.
Mm,
And every single day I wish I would have started when I was 18
yeah,
or younger, cuz back then in 2000, or even in 2001, I could have there were several places that I could have learned wrestling, and I could have actually been wrestling.
yeah,
um a friend of mine, Maverick Summers, he wrestles in the Tennessee area. He joined the Marine Corps, and he actually started wrestling in Japan. One of his first duty stations was in Japan, and he actually started wrestling over there. So I'm just like, man, out in Southern California, there were so many wrestling companies that I could have just went to and been like, hey, I want to do this while I was in the service.
yeah,
Because every weekend, unless we were like on deployment or doing a field op with training, man, it was free. So
yeah. So
I spent.
oh, go
Oh
ahead,
no,
sir.
you're fine. Go ahead.
'Cause my undergrad and my college and everything was in Jonesboro, and I had no idea that there was any sort of wrestling around here.
Oh, about
And so,
when was that?
uh, I 2013 is whenever I
Oh wow.
went to college right
Uh,
here.
you know Rodney Mack,
That name sounds familiar.
Red Dog Rodney Mack.
Name sounds familiar.
He was in WWF or WWE for a little bit. He actually had him and Jazz actually had a show in Jonesboro, uh, over there, not too far from where MACW used to be.
Yeah. And so
And
just knowing
I believe Craig was running about that time too.
he
So
was, yeah, I think
yeah,
so.
that's wild, man.
And I think Hoxie was running too, wasn't it?
Yeah. Hoxie was up and running then.
Yeah, and so also just more of a thing to where it's like, hey, you actually can do this. Because I know growing up, all I wanted to be was a professional wrestler. Um, and my parents weren't exactly the most thrilled with that. My teachers also were not very thrilled with that. It was very much, oh, you're too smart for this, which I think was kind of just a euphemism for look at your options, kids. You're 5'8", you're 240 pounds, not in a good way. Um, I remember it was like finally one time I was like 16 and my dad kind of sat me down and it was like, look, son, you're this isn't going to work. It's not attainable. You're not you're not going to the gym or anything. You're just talking about this. You're not going to do it. And then honestly, that's probably if I can talk to smaller Tyler, that's probably the conversation we're having before the ADHD and autism. But
Right.
uh,
Well, like before like growing up, I was a huge fan of wrestling. WWF, 80s WWF, 90s WWF, Memphis television, Memphis on Channel 5. That was kind of my growing up. And then when I graduated high school, I joined the Marine Corps and kind of put it on the back burner. And like, but it was always like, man, wrestling, I would love to do it, but I don't know anybody that does it. I don't even
yeah,
wouldn't even know the first person to talk to. maybe it'll never happen. And it just so happens every year in Porsche they do a Porsche picnic where they have like rides and stuff.
Mm.
And Cody only, I was
Mm.
a really good friend of him and with him in high school. Um, I ran into him and just kind of catching up, and he explained that he'd been wrestling for all this time and doing all this cool stuff and just traveling the roads and wrestling. And I'm like, that's it. That's the thing that I want to do. And now that
Yeah.
I know somebody, let's make this thing happen. And uh, at the time, ASWF was the closest wrestling that I knew of.
Yeah.
And so it was almost trying to get ring time there was a little bit more difficult because
Mm.
they had their show on Saturday night, and then Sunday was their training day, but they also hosted like birthdays and stuff like that. So it was really hard to get ring time. So it kind of just, I got out of the Marine Corps in 2007. 2008 was kind of just not really knowing how to be able to get in the ring or not really having an
Mm.
opportunity. And then in 2009, I talked to another buddy of mine, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I'm a wrestler." And I'm like, "Holy shit."
Yeah.
And my wife, at first I was like, my wife was like, "Look, you probably should find a hobby."
Yeah.
And, then this hobby kind of turned into, 14 years of traveling the entire Mid-South and hitting a couple of spots up north and just enjoying my time.
Yeah. I will say my parents are extremely supportive now. Um, they come to visit. They come to watch almost everything, which
That's
is
awesome.
saying something because it's like a 3.5 hour drive each time.
Yeah.
Uh, so they're probably going to come up every weekend in Hoxie whenever I'm
Oh, sweet.
working in
Sweet.
December. So
Well, that's wrestling with ADHD, man. We've been going for about an hour and 27 minutes.
yeah.
We got through it. I always get like right before my wrestling matches, I always get butterflies, and
Mm.
before the show, I always get butterflies. I generally log on about 7:30, and then I stress. I stress getting everything set up, and I sent you the link shortly after
Yeah.
7:30, and like I was ready to go. I was ready to do it, and like I'm excited, and it's almost like a wave of relief washes over me because I had this idea for wrestling with ADHD several years ago. But again, I've got ADHD, so it was really one of those
Yeah.
things where like I wrote it in a planner. I put the planner in a desk drawer. I moved several times, and the planner just disappeared. What's up?
Yeah, we have another cat. This is Lottie.
Ah,
Sorry.
special guest.
Oh yeah.
Special guest number 3.
Maybe if we could. I don't think Kabuki will get out here. She is 25 pounds. She's 20 pounds. So
Right on.
it's more cat than
My,
webcam.
yeah. But man, Tyler, I had a blast getting to know you more. I know
Oh,
we've talked. I know we've talked in locker rooms. Um, I knew you before you knew me. I knew of you before you knew me. So
huh.
I watch a lot of wrestling, and I love watching people perform. So
Yeah.
uh,
That was one of the things that kind of like surprised me because Craig was telling me about it sometimes. She's like, people know who you are because you're at least. He's like, you're affiliated with MACW, so they know who you are or know of
yes,
you.
yes,
So it's
absolutely.
like, ah,
One thing that I've realized is, people are watching all the time.
yeah,
I had an experience not too long ago with what's up. No, it, I had an experience not too long ago where some people that I work with had been watching some matches from Hoxie, and actually
yeah,
reached out to a couple of guys there, and I was just like, I told y'all guys, eyes are always on you, so just work on your craft and just expect expect people to be looking, because
Yeah.
if
Don't
you're
shit
doing
talk people on social media.
right. Well, I used to have a bad habit about that. Do you know who
Yeah.
Bullpain is?
No.
Oh, he wrestled in the WCW. Really good friends with Dirty Little Dave, and I used to have a bad habit of being really pissed off when people talked shit about indie wrestlers,
Yeah.
because damn it, I'm an indie wrestler.
Yeah.
Um, so he had made a post on Facebook, and it was about booking names and instead of using local talent.
Mm.
And I'm like, look here, you piece of shit. I am local talent. And he blocked me for like
Mm.
almost 5 years. And yeah, dude, it was wild. I was a lot less nice than what I
Yeah.
said, but of course, being a Marine, I tend to speak my mind. It's a positive and a negative.
Yeah.
But I um, I finally had the opportunity to reach out to him, and he accepted my apology. And you know, I can shoot him a message, and he'll actually read it and write back if he's got time. So
Yeah.
you think that bridges are burned, but then as long as you man up and realize that maybe I was in the wrong a lot more than he was,
Yeah. I just
and I
didn't
was.
realize how small the world was. Because
Oh,
I saw
absolutely.
one person on Facebook that I knew, they were very vocal about a spot that happened on Impact. And then somebody tagged the wrestler with like their personal Facebook
Yeah.
in the comments. And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing. Like the more places you work and the more talent you work with, you'll recognize that some of these people, and the option is always there, even for you
Yeah.
to get noticed or get seen. And before too long, this Wrestling with ADHD and Bruce, episode number 6, is
Yeah.
one of my most popular ones, because you got signed or you got noticed, and then people are saying the same thing, like, holy crap, they said something about Tyler, and then and then dude tagged him in it, like, holy crap. But yeah, that was a crazy, a wild recollection, or actual understanding the business. um, there's an indie show in almost every town in America, and even in a lot of places overseas, but the wrestling community is so small
Yeah.
that like guys that you wrestle with on a regular basis, you know, and including yourself, may eventually get get
Yeah.
pulled to do something that you know younger in the business you never would have even imagined would happen. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Book
that's
Ugly Steve. Let's.
book Ugly Steve,
Yeah.
book Tyler. I've watched him wrestle. He gets better every time I see him. So um, seriously, if he can, he shared it. I shared it. Look him up. One thing that I love doing with this is showing people, or and putting it out there, that the people that I have on the show, they're wrestling. Go watch their stuff. Go follow them. Go like. Go share. Um, Social media nowadays is so huge and it's so vast that what you do this weekend could be seen around the world. Uh, One little thing is all it takes. Jimmy Hart told me that a long time ago. One thing that you do could be the thing that gets you signed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the days of sitting in tapes and actually having somebody that matters watch them. Oh, look at that! He put his info up. I love it. I absolutely love it. Um,
Yeah. Don't
I'm
go to
all.
Book Ugly Steve. I don't have that one. Um, somebody else took it.
Oh wow!
Well, no, I try to do it, and then it turns out you can only have so many Gmail accounts associated with your phone number. And if you try to go around that and like get a Google Voice number and try to do that, they will ban that Gmail account.
Oh wow!
So
That's
yeah, Book Ugly Steve is banned.
dang. I
we got
learned
booked
something.
Steve Scruggs, so in case I ever am not ugly, you know.
Massively talented, massive amount of potential. I believe you're in the right place, and you made the right steps. Craig is a super immensely knowledgeable, talented wrestler in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
His dad Dwayne was a monster.
Oh, some of the
Um,
stories he's told me of his dad.
I luckily when I was introduced to him, anything that he did, I was always on his good side. So
Yeah,
I never got to witness. I never got to be a part of the losing end of a battle with Dwayne. So
yeah. I remember one time he told me how like his dad was training somebody, and they were too green, and they like booked a match and everything, and I don't think they told Dwayne. Uh, and so, but Dwayne was there, and so uh, while he's like his trainee's walking out to the match, Dwayne catches him, beats the shit out of him, and then goes into the match and wrestles what he
right.
was supposed to do.
Dude, I have heard that exact same story. And I know there was it was a lot bigger than the condensed version.
Yeah.
Wild times back in the day,
Oh
dude.
yeah.
Wild
No.
times. I pine for the days when wrestling was as protected as it was.
Mhm.
um I understand that everything has to evolve, but man,
Yeah.
I
I
loved.
wasn't sure if I should have came on here like wearing my mask. Like,
Oh no, you're like
yeah.
that. I tell people all the time. Did you ask? Did you ask somebody?
Oh, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I
Uh,
didn't.
this
I was
is.
just like, well, I'm using my real name and I'm
Oh
using
yeah.
my real voice because I do have an accent with Steve.
Mm. But yeah, I kind of get worried about that at times too, because I portray a couple of different characters
Mhm.
when on the different shows that I do. So I'm just like, look, this is me. This is who I am. Outside of that, like in this little box right here, I'm Bruce.
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't like it, that's unfortunate, and they can tell me about it, and we'll see what happens,
Yeah.
and we'll go from there. But I guess I'm gonna go ahead and
Sure.
sign off. Let everybody know. Stick around after the live stream ends, and just want to kind of pick your brain a little bit outside of the live. So,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 6 of Wrestling with ADHD and Bruce. Pro Wrestling Tyler.